Boys, so y'all have been asking me about tier 2 builds. A lot of you guys have been trying to figure out your tier 2 builds, and I thought I would put this video together to help you guys out. So rather than look at my quest log and just copy exactly what it is, I think this information that I'm going to provide for you in this video is going to be more beneficial, because the reality is, guys, the builds that I have in my quest log, every single one of them can be adjusted and should be adjusted to your liking. In fact, a lot of my builds in the quest log are baseline guides that I would expect most of you guys to adjust depending on what you guys prefer. I have written out a long description. They just recently gave me more characters, so I can add some more context, but I feel like a video going over additional context on top of this would be very helpful, because these builds can be very much taken out of context, and yeah, the more context the better, right, guys? So what we're going to start with today is are the stat thresholds. A lot of you guys just don't know what thresholds you should be hitting, so I'm going to tell you guys what the thresholds are for tier 2. Now keep in mind that these thresholds are general. Of course, they could be higher or lower than these depending on this is a very, and obviously the class that you play is going to have a big determining factor as to how much you can get. Also, these stats that I'm going to go over, this is sheets. So this is before any buff. So Shadow Walker buff, food buffs, mastery, all of that. This is just sheet. Okay, guys? So based off of that, the HP thresholds for tier 2, generally speaking, they're going to be around 20 to 40k HP. 20k are like your bow dagger users. Okay, greatsword dagger users, a lot of those guys are going to be like 30. Okay, 40k is when you're pushing into tanks, like true tanks. SNS greatsword brawler builds, you're going to see them somewhere between 30 to 35k HP. Again, we're talking sheet here, okay? Attack speed, big variance here, obviously 30 to 70%. A lot of the DPS attack speed, faster attacking classes, for example, greatsword dagger, you're going to see them up around 50 to 60% plus. So this is the threshold. 70% is, I haven't really seen any personally that are at 70%, but they're between that threshold, if that makes sense. 30 to 70, right? Not quite 70. Hit, this is a big one. So 1.8k to 3k. This is a big one because obviously Spear and Greatsword both come with free quote unquote hit. You have your Vital Force that gives you a significant amount of hit. You have over 700 free hit should you choose to spec for that with Spear, if you choose the Nimble Step Mastery, that's top right, and if you take the hit passive from Unyielding Sentinel. All of these things should be considered, okay? But generally speaking, we're going to be at 1.8k to 3k hit. Okay, so how does this break down? If you want to go full send hit build, full send hit builds with Greatsword should be around 3k hit. Okay, even for Spear, for that matter. When it comes to melee hits, 3k is like you're going to be pretty much for the most part hitting everyone, and you are considered a full send hit build. So keep in mind you're going to get extra hits from, let's say, Nimble Steps and Unyielding Sentinel if you're Spear. So this is why you see Greatsword Spear builds have a lot less hit, because they don't need as much hit to hit some of these thresholds post buff. So 3k hit is you're pretty much not missing anyone. 1.8k hit is you're gonna see generally like bow staffs and ranged weapons be kind of sitting at the 1.8 to 2.2k hit range. The higher hit values will with those ranged classes are generally going to be like 2.5 ish, if that makes sense. Nimble Step was, I'm talking about the mastery. Sorry, the mastery I'm referring to. Let's just be very clear here. The mastery that I'm referring to is this. I don't remember what the name of it was. What was it? Let's go. What was this? Nimble Steps, yeah, the Nimble Step Mastery right there. All out assault. You get it changes the CC resistance and range evasion to melee hit chance 336 and attack speed. So okay, going back, ranged, so like, yeah, ranged hit builds that are full sending hit will be glass, but they're going to be at like 2.5k hit Generally speaking, when it does come to range, you want to be over 2k hit, because the way range and hit interact with range classes is a bit different compared to melee, because, for example, greatsword is more based off of combo damage, whereas X-bow and bow, it's just constant sustained DPS. So you're just going to want to maximize damage via hit for a lot of these range classes. Anyways, 1.8 to 3k is kind of that range. If you're at 2.5, so what you're going to notice, we're going to talk about evasion here soon, is if you're at 3k hit, you're going to have to give up a lot of survivability to hit those thresholds. If you want to go like 2.5k hit, yes, you're going to be missing on the people that have 3k evasion, but you're going to have a lot more survivability because you're going to have either more endurance or more evasion in that regard. We're going to have a look at a couple of template builds here in a sec, but just to give you some added context. Crit, you're looking at 1k to 2k crit. I don't really see builds hitting 2k crit, if I'm going to be honest. Most true DPS classes are somewhere between 1.6, like 1.6 to 1.9, 1.6, 1.7, 1.8 is kind of more of a it's more of a specific number that you're going to see more commonly. Sorry. But again, there's exceptions to all the rules. 1 to 2k crit is usually what you're going to see. Heavy attack, you're going to see anywhere from 300 to 700. Evasion kind of goes the same with hand in hand with crit, with hit. You're going to see roughly around 1.8 to 3.3. The reason why some people take 1.8 is because obviously dagger with Shadow Walker, you can get this up to like 2.5, which makes it borderline worth it, because there are going to be range classes, for example, that hit 2.5k evasion, but there will be a lot of range classes that are like 1.8, 2k evasion, and having 2.5k evasion. I'm sorry, I feel like I misphrased that. If you have 1.8k sheet evasion, and with Shadow Walker that takes you to, let's just say, for example, 2.4. Let's just say 2.5. If you're hitting a target, if you're trying to evade a target that's trying to hit you that has 2k hit because they're not a maxed hit build, then that differential of 400 or 500 evasion is still pretty good value, which is why a lot of people still go evasion at this threshold. But obviously you can push that up even higher to 3.3k. So 1.8k to 3.3. 3.3k is very high. Is it possible to get higher than 3.3? It is, but 3.3 is pretty much the upper end threshold that you're going to see with a lot of these builds. Endurance, 1k to 2.5k endurance. 2.5 is really high. Generally, it's more like 1k to 2k, but you can go up north past 2k, obviously. Collision resist, you're going to see around 800 to 1.3. Now, some people do take under 1k. I see some people that have criticized my build talking about, oh, you're wasting collision resist. You're not even 1k. Again, acting like they know what they're talking about, when in reality, they have no idea what they're talking about because they don't know what to look for. The reality is some people will take 800 collision resist because this can still be value, because there are passives in the mastery that give you additional collision resist. For example, you get almost 200 from Jurad's Patience. You can get an additional couple hundred, I think. I can't remember exactly. I think 200-300 off the top of my head from the mastery tree with SNS. Let me see here. This card from, I think SNS gives you the counter barrier one, barrier of concentration. Sorry, I was off. It's not 200-300. It's 150. You get CC. You get 150 CC resistance from there. And there's other ways to push that higher, right? It really depends on your spec. There is a lot of things in the mastery tree, depending on your class, that gives you additional collision resist on activate. So there are builds that take less than 1,000 because realistically during their important windows, they will be up over 1,000. And you really want at least 1,000 for it to be even worth it. Ideally, you want to be over 1.2, which you'll see like up to 1.3. And the reason why is because collision chance is relatively free for a lot of greatsword builds. You'll see a lot of people have like 1k to 1.2k collision chance. However, most bow users that are using the tornadoes and stuff, they're not taking, they're not really building into collision chance. Most are not building into collision chance, which gives it value, right? So like you could be sitting there and be like, well, Kanon, you said 1k has value collision resist. What's that gonna, like, how's that gonna help you if people have 1k? Well, greatsword users can have 1k, will very often have 1k to 1.2k. So obviously they're gonna ignore that. But there's still some value with collision chance. in other areas. For example, Cordy Expo spins, which I know a lot of you guys are probably not considering when you're talking about your builds. Things like tornadoes and whatever that may be, right? So moving on, weaken resistance. Now this is a stat that some of you guys may have started hearing just because we've been recently starting to tell you guys and echoing this. Weaken resistance is a stat that has become a lot more meta in tier 2, mainly because it's a great way to shut down wand users, healer users, especially SNS wand users. So right now, SNS wand at the end game, and keep in mind, I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not an SNS wand user. I do not play this class. I do not play wand. This is coming from my experience playing with and against them, and also things that I've been told directly from my guild leader who plays SNS wand, as well as other SNS wand mains in our guild, in KR. And our guild is the most competitive guild / alliance in KR, by the way. So with that said, why is weaken resist? Okay, so weaken resist is mainly to counter the mana burn and the heal reduction weaknesses that can get applied, to the point where at endgame tier 2, survivability and healing output isn't really even that big of an issue. It's not even an issue. What's actually shutting down these SNS wands are those weakens, right? So what they've done is a lot of these guys are actually giving up a decent bit of collision resist to build into this. They're certainly giving up skill damage resistance and prioritizing weaken resistance, because this is a better, more effective way to shut down these players, and that's what's kind of made this stat a little bit more meta. Moving on, skill damage resistance. This is still pretty similar. Resistance, you're looking at 300 to 600 range, and skill damage boost around 300 to 500 skill damage boost is what most DPS are taking. Now, guys, once again, take this with a grain of salt. These are not absolute windows. There are, of course, people that have less and more than these. This is just to give you guys a general idea of what to look out for when you're putting your builds together, okay? Couple of things I want to mention before giving you guys some examples with some of the builds that I have, okay? Number one, Nebula accessories. A lot of you guys are building for Nebula accessories. I would advise not to. 99% of you guys will never get Nebula accessories. Okay? Artifacts or Arc Boss items. Artifacts, fake stats, trait reso, purple runes. I am going to bet the house that we're not going to get trait reso. I've been saying this for a long time. And I'm going to bet the house that we're not getting purple runes. Purple runes come with 3-star trial dungeons, and we're not getting 3-star trial dungeons out the gate. If we had trait reso, they would have said that we were getting trait reso. They were pretty clear in saying what we were going to get, the new forms of vertical progression, character progression, which did not include trait reso. So do not build for this. And this is especially important for you triple evasion build Andes out there, because a lot of you triple evasion Andes out there are getting a lot of your melee evasion specifically from trait reso. And if you don't have that trait reso, you're going to have a lot less melee evasion. Okay? And then also active stats. What does this mean? Guys, you have to understand, especially when you're looking at my builds, there are areas where you're going to pick up stats from activates. Okay, what does this mean? For example, I could pick up 150 collision resist and even more collision resist for Barbarian's Dash, which is down here. All CC resistance is 120, right? That's like 300, and then you add another 200 for Jared's patience. We're talking like, this is starting to add up. You see what I'm saying? So like, there are stats that are not taken or pushed to the max, sometimes due to the activates that you can have on maybe your artifacts, or the passive or the passive procs that you get from your mastery tree, whatever that may be. Okay. So please understand that. So let's dive into this. Let's give a couple of examples. Okay. Now, if you take a look at my builds here, what I've done with my builds is I try to really give them a very clear identity. I see here people criticizing this build saying, oh, it's too squishy. You're going to get rock. Look at the endurance you have. Listen, if you're going for a full cent hit build, which is what this is, we have 3,000 hit, okay? You are going to be giving up endurance. Generally, what you're going to see is you're going to see hit builds, full hit builds, give up survivability and or damage in order to hit those hit thresholds. If you don't want to give up that survivability, you can have less hit, but you will have more survivability. So the reason why I'm personally going this build is because this gives me the ability to play a DPS. This is like a pseudo DPS. I even write it in here. This is a fake tank. Okay, it's a tanky DPS. I can build into a more tanky option by simply replacing two pieces. Now I have two-piece palace. That's going to give me 8% block chance, right? And if I redo my masteries and I redo my runes, suddenly I've got a lot more endurance. I've got 2.1k melee endurance here, 2.6k here, 1.7 here, 1.8k here. Now this is looking like it's looking more like a tank, really, right? So this can easily, you can easily adjust the endurance values and the damage values and the hit values simply through trait reso and through your runes and your mastery without swapping too many pieces of gear. I feel like this is really important for you to know, to understand, because these builds are template builds, okay? These are templates. Use this as a guide, and then from here, you can adjust the stats as you see accordingly. This right here, because it's a full scent hit build, I've taken health resonance effects on this, okay? Now, why did I do this? Number one reason why I added resonance effects, when resonance does come out, you guys are going to be asking me what resonance effects. I don't want to go through all these builds and add resonance effects. This is the reason why I've added resonance effects. Otherwise, for your builds for tier 2 early, do not add the resonance effects, okay? Second kind of semi reason, I added health because health is really easy. You're not reliant on HP with this build. If I were at like 1.8k to 2k endurance because I had endurance resonance effects, that's kind of like a fake endurance build for early tier 2, because you're not going to have this, right? You're not going to have this amount of endurance if that endurance was reliant on the resonance effect. So that's another reason why I've just kind of put health in there, because it's easier to kind of it's kind of easier expectation wise. Does that make sense? So okay, where are we? Resonance effects. The other thing to understand is artifacts, okay? These artifacts, you will never get max roll triple bis stat. Never gonna happen. Kanon, why did you do it? I did it to show you guys what stat would be ideal. That's why I took it, because you will roll 3 random traits on this. I picked the 3 best that I think so that you guys know which 3 traits to look out for. This build, as well as a lot of other builds, will never have the amount of endurance and or hit or evasion, whatever that may be. You'll never get that much, okay? Please keep that in mind. Right? Okay, so going back to this build, bring this build. This is a hit focused build, and as you can see, you can easily adjust this build to identify more as a tank. You can easily add more endurance to it. You can bring down the hit. You could do whatever, right? There's a lot of room to play with this build. If we are to talk a little bit more about the evasion hit thresholds, let's take a look at the let's look at the Greatsword Dagger here, okay? So what you're gonna notice here is this is a 2k evasion build. I'm just going off of sheet numbers here, right? This is a hit focused build. So as you can see, I have like 2.9k hit with this build. What do I give up? I give up evasion, melee evasion. I don't have very much melee evasion. I have bare minimum, I would call 2k sheet bare minimum, ranged and magic evasion. So I'm still going to be relatively squishy. Okay, if I want to go full hit build, I'm going to have to give up defenses, and I'd rather not give up total damage on Greatsword Dagger because of the playstyle around it. Okay, you need to get in, execute, and get out. If you can't one combo them, you're not going to reproc the stealth, and stealth is hands down your best defensive mechanism. If we take a look at this right here, this is a different variation. This is a different set here. This goes 80 dex, which you're going to lose the evasion. This one's under 80 dex. That allows us to get the extra great killer here, extra evasion. This is, again, you can adjust these stats as you go. This is the bare minimum. This is very little. This is very, very, very little evasion. but what you get in return is melee hit chance. As you can see, you get 2.9. Now, let's talk about the triple evasion builds. These builds are pretty good, but what you're going to notice is you're giving up like 500 hit. 2.476 hit, which is pretty good, by the way, but you're getting a lot more evasion with it. 2.7, 2.5, 3k melee evasion. This one, 3.2, 2.5, 2.5 sheet, 2.8, 2.9, 2.7, and all of these give up hit in order to do so. This has 2k hit, this has 2.4k hit, this has 2.5k hit. When it comes to the hit thresholds, guys, when it comes to melee specifically, the hit thresholds are going to be as follows: 2k, 2.5, and 3. Full hit builds are going to have 3k, but those 3k hit builds are going to lack defensives and they're going to be very squishy. 2.5k builds are going to be 2 evasion builds that have that will have a lot of evasion with 2 stats, or they're going to have like balanced stats across 3 stats with evasion. Triple evasion, but not like fucking 3k across the board with all 3 stats, right? And then the 2k evasion, you're going to obviously have even more, or excuse me, 2k hit builds, you're going to have even more evasion. So it really depends on you. If you want to have more survivability as DPS, you're going to go more evasion. Generally, you're going to sacrifice hit in order to do that. If you want to be able to hit everyone and not have to deal with evasion, you're going to go for a higher hit build, which is going to generally require you to sacrifice defensives. A little bit different for ranged. When it comes to ranged, generally speaking, the more hit you have, the more DPS you have, right? You're not going to be able to get enough hit to cover the evasion threshold, which you shouldn't, because ranged DPS is more sustained damage that's just constantly going. So how does the hit thresholds work with ranged magic? Well, the more the better, essentially, is how it works. Lower hit builds are going to be like 1.8 with range. A lot of builds are going to be between 2 to 2.2. I'd recommend over 2. And then the full set glass cannon builds are going to be like 2.5k hit. The more hit, the more damage you're going to do. That's kind of the way it goes. This is a general breakdown of the stat thresholds when it comes to hit versus evasion. And I feel like crit and endurance is pretty self-explanatory. Generally speaking, you're going to have like full DPS builds be around that 1.6 to 1.8k crit. And then non-DPS builds like SNS Greatsword hit builds being in the lower 1Ks, anywhere from like 1k to 1.3k range is kind of where they're going to be sitting at. And obviously you guys know how endurance works, right? So that's pretty much it, guys. I put together a bunch of template builds for you guys to work off of. Please keep in mind these template builds are exactly that, okay? Keep in mind you're not going to get as many stats here. Keep in mind the trait reso needs to go. Oh, one more thing. Triple evasion builds. Triple evasion builds that go 3k into melee. All of these builds require trait reso on melee evasion. That's what you're going to notice. If trait reso is not in the game, guys, you could expect if you're at 3k melee evasion in your build, you could expect that to come down at least 500, roughly, give or take. 500-600 evasion is what you're going to lose. Your 3k evasion, melee evasion, is going to be somewhere between 2.4 to 2.5k melee evasion. Okay, that's what's going to happen. Does that make sense? I see a question in chat. Why not use 4-piece trance on my bow dagger? Because 4-piece trance doesn't maximize hit. It gives you a lot of crit damage, but hit overall gives you more DPS in PvP, because range evasion, everyone and their uncle has fucking 9,000 billion range evasion. It's kind of insane. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Keep in mind, just remember those thresholds. If you're a triple evasion, Andy, and you've got 3k melee evasion in your build, that's probably going to come down to 2.4, 2.5. If that happens, remember those hit thresholds. A lot of people are going to have like 2.5k hit on Greatsword Dagger, for example. As you can see here, this build had almost 2.5k hit, right? And still had really good evasion. Granted, this is not really 3.2 without the trait reso. This is going to be a little bit lower. Also, the hit thresholds that you see in my build are going to be a little bit lower, because I have taken double hit resos, but that's only like 80 hit. It's not going to be significantly less. You do want to knock off probably realistically a couple hundred hit because of the artifacts as well. Couple hundred hit with the Rezos. Once Rezos comes in, it's going to be pretty close. Okay. All right, that's pretty much it. Why people run so much hit while most players will run endurance? Because they won't. It's going to be there's going to be a lot of people that run evasion. It's going to be the same thing. It's going to be the same thing. It's rock, paper, scissors at the end of the day. Non-hit builds, full damage with evasion is going to be absolutely better than full set hit builds against endurance users. That's of course going to be the case. But most DPS users are probably still going to lean towards evasion. However, with the new mastery, we definitely might see more endurance builds, even with daggers. But we'll see. We'll see. That's up to you guys, and that's up to the players to kind of build into. But that's pretty much it. Wanted to put this quick video for you guys. Sorry if that was a little ranty, if that was a little unorganized here. We're doing this on Twitch. I don't have a script in front of me, but I hope that made sense. Okay, guys, if you have any questions, please let me know. I've tried to add as much context as I can in here. Now that they've increased the max characters, I will try to add even more context. But yeah, those are pretty much the main thresholds. I think I got everything, right? Did we get everything, chat? I think we got everything.